Good morning, everyone. I'm so pleased to see everyone here joining us, tuning in for day 2 of our first ever virtual BCCFA conference. I think it's our 17th conference, but our first time doing it virtually. So thank you everyone for being here and for bearing with us through the technologies. And now it is my absolute privilege to introduce the Honorable Katrina Conroy, Minister of Forests, Lands, and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. Katrina Conroy was first elected as MLA for Kootenay West in May 2009 and has represented the West Kootenay since 2005. She previously served as Minister of Children and Family Development and worked to make life better for families across BC. Katrina has had a varied career before coming in MLA. She was one of BC's first female power engineers and worked as an early childhood educator, administrator, college instructor, and small business person. Katrina has worked and volunteered in her community as the executive director of Kootenay Family Place, an instructor at Selkirk College, co-chair of the Castlegar and District Planning Council, treasurer of the Regional District of Central Kootenay Community Futures Board, and founding board member of the Community Social Services Employers Association. So for those of us working in community forestry, certainly see that that there's a lot of alignment with your history, Katrina. Katrina lives in Pass Creek on a ranch that breeds prize-winning polled Hereford cattle. Very cool. She has 4 children and 9 grandchildren. So welcome, Minister Conroy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you for that introduction. And I want to recognize all of your respective nations, territories that you are joining us from here today. And I'm joining you from the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. I'm in my office in Victoria. And I really want to thank the organizers for including me in your annual General Assembly of the British Columbia Community Forest Association. And it's really great to be here. And I want to recognize Jennifer Gunter, the Executive Director of the Association, as today's moderator. And I was talking earlier with her and Susan, who do great work in this organization. And they said that you had a really great day yesterday. So that's really good to hear. So the forest sector is a cornerstone of BC's economy. It supports families and communities in every corner of this province. And I like to remind people of that. This is just not a rural sector. It is a sector that's across every corner of the province. But BC's forest sector has seen its challenges even before the impacts of COVID and how that's affected us all. And our government acted really quickly to support the forest sector from the economic impacts of COVID. We introduced a number of measures to assist the industry and worked with public health officer to ensure our tree planting season could go ahead and to support sustainable forests and fight the impacts of climate change. And was really proud to acknowledge that not only did we plant over 300 million trees in 2020, we did it again this year, and we're hoping to do it again next year. And that's with all the good work of the people that are involved in the silviculture industry. But our economic recovery will need a long range view and a change to how we do business. So this government's vision is for a forest sector that's resilient, and it's also sustainable. It means a diverse forest sector made up of companies large and small, as well as communities and Indigenous communities. It means doing more value-added manufacturing right here in BC. Protecting vital resources, it's a priority. And so is creating jobs for BC workers and communities. And within this sector are community forest agreements, which help foster a diverse and sustainable forest economy. Community managed forests create opportunities for people in rural and Indigenous communities and enhance local stewardship. Community forests also allow for local management and support opportunities in areas like for wildlife, recreation areas, and watersheds. And as managers of community forests, you are all very well aware of how you each contribute to sustainable forest management. Looking to the future, I am committed to ensuring the community forest program remains adaptive and flexible and continues to expand where opportunities exist. We've laid out 3 guiding principles in our intentions paper that we introduced earlier this year that inform some components of a vision for forestry in BC. I really believe that community forest agreements should easily see themselves in the future of all three of these principles. Our first goal is to increase and diversify forest sector participation. Community forest agreements are a great example of a model that encourages integrating community vision and local resilience into the sector. The second looks at ensuring our forests are managed for the resiliency, fiber use, and forest values. And the Community Forest Agreement Program has many good initiatives underway on this front, as you have identified in your 2021 indicators report. And the third is strengthening of the social contract. The CFA program has already demonstrated a leadership role both with local communities and our First Nations partners. And I encourage CFA holders to think about how they can develop this concept further and continue supporting local operators. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to answer some questions for you, perhaps talk more about our legislation that we tabled on Wednesday, the amendments to the Forest and Range Practices Act. But right now, I'm going to turn it back to Jennifer for really some exciting news.
Thank you, Minister Conroy, for those remarks. And indeed, we're hoping to have more dialogue with you here this morning about your vision for community forests and the future of the forest sector. Now it's my honor to begin the presentation of the Robin Hood Memorial Award for Excellence in Community Forestry. Robin was the president of the association for nearly 10 years. And since his passing, we have had this award to really recognize community forests that are outstanding and exemplify the values that Robin brought forward of innovation, of creating social and economic benefits for their communities, of creativity and really thinking outside the box. So I'm going to just begin the presentation this morning by acknowledging 3 community forests who are receiving honorable mentions this year. And then I'll hand it back over to Minister Conroy for the awards. So these are groups that most certainly demonstrate their significant benefit to their communities and are leaders in community forestry. So for 2020, I should say this year, because our conference was canceled last year, we are able to offer the awards for both 2020 and 2021. So the honorable mention for 2020 is the Nakusp Area Community Forest. And I should say that after the minister makes all of the awards, then we'll give an opportunity for the recipients to say a few words. The Nakusp Community Forest is doing incredible things, and if all goes well, we will be having our conference in person there next fall. So we look forward to that, and everyone will have a chance to learn more about the good things that they're doing. We have 2 honorable mentions for 2021, the Williams Lake Community Forest, who are leaders in many respects, most notably their partnership between the municipality and the Williams Lake Band, and their leading work in wildfire risk reduction. And also for 2021, we have an honorable mention of the Wensiqua Community Forest in Smithers. And they too are doing tremendous work in wildfire risk reduction. And as we learned yesterday, also in old growth management. So congratulations. And as I say, we'll give you a few moments to say a few words after the minister makes the awards. Minister?
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. And I want to say that I did have the opportunity to meet the late Robin Hood in Likely in 2015 or 14, I believe it was. And I certainly, they referred to him as the mayor of Likely. And I certainly have heard his passion for the community forest programs and forests in general. So I think it's a real honor for people to be recipients of these awards. And the 2 award winners that I'm going to be presenting for both 2020 2020 and 2021. These recipients, they continue to exemplify the values of the program and of Robin Hood. And by looking for new ways to diversify economic interests and improve stewardship practices and provide benefits to local residents and area First Nations. So I'm going to say congratulations to 2020's winner, the West Boundary, and I have these here, the West Boundary Community Forest. And I'm going to show these. I hope you can all see these. So here's one of the awards. The first one for 2020, the West Boundary Community Forest, they get the 2020 award. And for 2021, the West Bank First Nation is getting the award for 2021, and we'll make sure that these plaques get sent to both of them. So congratulations to all of the winners, and I'm very familiar with the Nakusp because it's my constituency, and have met with the group there and know the good work that they've done. So I'm really well aware of all the good work that community forests do in this project, in this province. So congratulations to the award winners.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's just, it's exciting to see those awards there in your office. Very, very cool. Thank you for that. And congratulations, everyone. So now I'd like to just give a few moments. I'll start with the honorable mentions. I'd like to introduce Aidan McLaren Coe of the Nakusp Nakusp Area Community Forest. Aidan is a director of the community forest and also a village councillor of Nakusp, and he will accept the award on behalf of NAC4.
So yeah, I'd just like to say that the Nakusp Area Community Forest, we operate on the traditional lands of the Snipes, Ktunaxa, Sayilks, and Secwepemc nations, and we value building relationships with all nations. So NAC4 would like to thank Minister Conroy and the BCCFA for this opportunity and for the honorable mention in the Robin Hood Memorial Award. And we'd like to extend our congratulations to the other community forests as well. Some of our projects in 2020 included supporting local manufacturing and hosting public engagement for our wildfire risk reduction projects, facilitating educational partnerships and building relationships with local stakeholders. So thanks again to Minister Conroy, to you, Jennifer, and to the BCCFA for this honorable mention.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you and congratulations. The next honorable mention, I'd like to invite Ken Day from the Williams Lake Community Forest. Now, Ken was the first manager, I think, of the Williams Lake Community Forest, and he's now the president of the Williams Lake Community Forest Board of Directors.
Thanks for that, for the opportunity to say thank you. Minister Conroy, members, friends, it's a pleasure to accept this honorable mention. Robin Hood was a friend, and to know that we're achieving aims that fit with his visions is a good thing, and so that's a pleasure. Specifically, I'd like to say thank you to Kent Watson and Hugh Flinton, who are the management team on the community forest, and certainly thank you to current and former directors who have set the vision and helped to keep the operation stable, and of course, to the partners who had a vision and strength to pursue this opportunity and stay the course until the agreement was in hand. And thank you to all of those. Thank you to the to BCCFA and Minister. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ken. Great to see you, and so pleased that you've received this honorable mention. Very well deserved. Now I'd like to invite David Dewitt from the Wet'suwet'en Community Forest. David is the co-chair of the board of directors of the Wet'suwet'en Community Forest and a Wet'suwet'en member of the Laksiliu clan. He's also the Natural Resources Department manager for the Office of the Wet'suwet'en. David?
Bin Hanzu, good morning all. How's my audio there, Jennifer?
Really good.
Excellent. Well, thank you. The Wet'suwet'en Community Forest Corporation is honored to receive this award, and we'd like to thank Minister Conroy for acknowledging the efforts of the board of directors. It really takes a lot of perspectives and a lot of shared values and time to achieve what the community forest has done. I feel like our success is in the strength of the diversity of our board, and you can only manage for multiple interests when there's voices behind those. I just really want to give credit to our board and just acknowledge that, like I mentioned yesterday, community forests are the forum to achieve multiple goals. The Wet'suwet'en hereditary leadership from years and generations in the past wanted to see and find ways of how the local economy, including the Wet'suwet'en, could benefit from local resource development in terms of education and services. And one of our late mayors of Smithers, Jim Davidson, was very instrumental in the work in getting the community forest off the ground. And he too shared the vision of finding a way in how the local communities could participate and benefit in local resource management and development. And here we are today with the Wet'suwet'en Community Forest Corporation managing a tenure and managing with community values to support services and support programs within our community. So just thank you for the acknowledgement of the work that we're doing, I would say. Misai.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much, and congratulations. Next, I'd like to go to or introduce Dan McMaster, the recipient of the 2020 Robin Hood Memorial Award is West Boundary Community Forest, and Dan is their manager. So Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Audio good?
It is.
That's the classic thing to ask. Thank you so much for Minister Conroy for the award for the association. I accept this very humbly on behalf of the West Boundary Community Forest. I've always looked up to all the nominees and award winners in the past years, and overwhelmed that you would choose us overall. There's a bunch of thank yous to make here, but first and foremost, my team of Peter Flett and Dean Demchuk, who really us three are so proud and honored to be part of the West Boundary Community Forest. And I want to make sure those names are out there too. They work very hard for the community forest, and I'm really proud of them. Our board, supportive, always engaged. I have one of the great boards of all CFAs out there. I can't thank them enough. They put a lot of trust in us, along with our shareholders as well of Midway and Greenwood. They give us the latitude to do some wonderful things. And I'll just say that, we survive out there and we're successful, I think, because of our transparency, definitely our good communication and our creativity. Among other things, those are a couple of three key things out there. From Vaughan Fiber Canada, which is the small sawmill in Midway that helps manage the community forest, along with our partnerships with the Osoyoos Indian Band. I think our trilogy of power has brought a lot of success. And although I may be a face that you see out there, I really appreciate everybody involved and humbled with all the wonderful things that all your community forests are doing out there too. So thanks again, Jennifer, Minister Conroy, and everybody else.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan. And again, congratulations. So well deserved. And now I'd like to invite Jordan Koble to accept the award on behalf of the West Bank First Nation Community Forest. Jordan is WFN counselor and also president of Intiti Resources, which manages the community forest. We've asked Jordan to do a bit of a presentation, a bit of storytelling for us to talk about the West Bank Community Forest and what they're doing. So Jordan, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. As Dan mentioned, I humbly accept this award on behalf of Intiti and West Bank First Nation, our community here. This is just such a pleasure to be here, such an honor to receive this award and have our community forest recognized. I want to give thanks to gentlemen in the room here, Mick Werschik and Dave Gill, who've been doing just tremendous work in our community forest for many, many years, and you've met them many times over the last couple of days here. Also give thanks to our board members, Chief Chris Derrickson and Garnett Murrow. Just tremendous people to work with, but just the people on the ground doing the work, interconnecting with our lands, replenishing our forests so that we have not just a forest, but an ecosystem of life for our children and great grandchildren down the road. It's just an amazing accomplishment for our community. And I'm one of the new kids on the block here, so I just I'm just kind of speechless, but as mentioned, we'll share a bit of a story as to how we got here, and I'll do my best to represent the journey as we got here. So our community forest to us is something that is very meaningful to our community. It's a responsibility we've had for thousands and thousands of years to be interconnected with the lands. We, as a community, are based at the valley bottom here near Okanagan Lake, but there's stories of my great-grandmother herding cattle up into the forest, up into right near our community forest where it's located today. And it's quite a trek, but we've been interconnecting with these lands and stewarding these lands for thousands upon thousands of years. And we're honored to continue that legacy of responsibility to care for our forests, the animals within the forest, and make sure our members are adhering to the responsibility to care for each other and care for the land. So our community forest to us, it provides us that responsibility to interconnect with the land. It allows us to make the decisions based on our ways of being and our thousands of years of knowledge of responsibility and teachings that have been passed on through our elders and now are being passed on to our children. It's about reconnecting our people to the land. We're based largely within an urban center here in the Okanagan, and so we're surrounded by forests, but it's really deceiving to see the greenery around us, but the devastation of past forestry practices, but it's also inspiring to see how we're reimagining how our interconnection with the forests are taking hold, and the responsibility towards stewardship is happening. But we also acknowledge that there's responsibility to provide work for our members, to make sure that there's opportunity for them not just to be responsible for the land, but be responsible to their families at home and be able to provide food on the table and bills to pay and all those good things. But it's also that responsibility to heal our land in and of itself, to make sure that as we take from the forest, we acknowledge our reciprocal relationship with it and make sure that we replenish it as we go along.
Yeah, Jordan, I don't want to interrupt, but I see Dave Gill there. The slides that you have up aren't advancing.
Okay, that's good to know. We'll you just get the nice title page. Hold on a second, we'll keep on working here. I'm good at filling time, so while Mick's trying to figure this out, we'll let's go here for a second.
Your words is the important part. So
yeah, there we go. If we put it on that slide, can you see it, or is it still?
Yeah,
okay.
We see that.
Well, okay, perfect. So all you missed was pretty pictures of our families and our communities working with Mick. Mick humbly acknowledges the role of knowledge keeper now. He's a young elder. We'll give him that credit. Hey, he's not the eldest of elders in our community, but he's been involved with our community forests for almost his entire life. And so now he's in that responsibility of passing that on to our family programs, to even our elders that are within our community. So that's what the picture you see there is, Mick taking the people on the land and doing some berry picking, doing some berry planting, and other harvesting practices up there. But as I mentioned, that responsibility to make sure that we can do the work on the land does require that access to revenue resources so that we can continue that work. So it's a very intricate balance of reciprocity, but also taking what the land has to offer in a respectful way. And TDE is fully owned by West Bank First Nation, and it has a responsibility to care for the Timhulau. That's that word there. In our language, that word is often translated to land, but what that word actually interprets more closely towards is the interconnection between Timiuch, which is all the living creatures that include us as human beings, but the birds, the bees, the plants, and the trees, and everything else in between, the land itself, and how we create energy through that interconnection as we move forward in life. We're constantly spiraling through the universe, and that is that energy that we create as we interconnect. And that energy is similar to the word in TTE. So in TTE is, again, often translated as our word for spring salmon, but it really represents the vibrations that salmon make as they swim upstream and communicate to the other salmon that are going to follow for generations to come. That energy that as we create through the air is similar to the energy that salmon create through the water. But salmon in and of itself represent an economy. And that economy today is often based on financials, but our economy represents the health of the land. And so that health of the Tumkulao is what is represented in our logo there, that interconnection between harvesting, between reciprocity through growth, but also that aspect of protection and responsibility to make sure that we have a forest for many, many, many generations to come. Our culture is deeply rooted in our forests. Everything we know to be true came from the land itself. The language that we know, the access to well-being and livelihood comes through the land. And that is the essence of our culture. And often I get asked, what medicines do I gather to heal my sickness? And I always have to remind people that culture isn't something you do once in a season. Culture is something that you do on a regular basis, often on a daily basis. And so huckleberry picking and huckleberry planting go hand in hand. It's something that you have to go up to the lands to know where the berries are at, but also know the different elevations as to where you can gather throughout the season. So that knowledge and that physical endurance that you need to go on the land helps replenish our spiritual and mental health all at the same time. We interconnect with many programs within West Bank First Nation. So NTT Resources is a wing of our corporate arm, but we want to make sure that our corporate entities is driven by the membership, the vision of the membership, the interconnection with the membership, but also involving the membership, not just through employment, but just through sharing of knowledge. As mentioned, Mick does a lot of teachings for our family programs and our elders. But often it's the children themselves that are teaching us as adults, as sometimes elders, because they're just bringing that natural spirit of childhood back into the land itself, that sense of curiosity, that sense of play, but that inherent sense of nurturing that we need. Okay, we're going to go up and so as mentioned, we'll just, we go on the land. That's a nice, wonderful picture of my Auntie Bonnie reconnecting in the area. Like I mentioned, my great grandmother used to herd her cattle way, way back in the day, almost over 100 years ago now. And so we're just reconnecting. Next pic there. And just other resources, trees aren't just for forestry. They're not just for logging. Trees provide us medicine. So collecting the large tops and learning how to utilize that and turn them into medicine is something that we need to reinstill within our community as we decolonize our practices and explore new ways to bring about new revenue resources. Sometimes we might have to think about how to create resource opportunities from the land itself. Large tops, birch bark tea, all these things that are abundant in our forest is something we need to engage with. This is just a beautiful picture from our lands over in the Gallagher's property. The tall young man there is Mick from 20 years back. I'm just kidding. That's his son Wade there and our family members just enjoying the views. As mentioned, our community forests are only stewarded because I can go to the next slide, because we have people on the land interconnecting. So our contractors are largely our members, our nation members at the very least, going on the land, reconnecting, but also providing that opportunity to provide food on their tables, work in their hearts, and responsibilities to pass on to the next generations. That's a picture of who we call Handsome Harvey. He's one of the originators of how we got a community forest there. And so Harvey Tronson Logging are one of our contractors, and they're largely responsible for transitioning from the management model of forestry that we brought forward to now a stewardship model. And, we have to have really good relationships with our contractors to make sure they understand the vision of NTTE so that they understand that profit isn't necessarily our number one priority anymore. Stewardship is more important because we want to make sure people like Harvey but his great-great-great-grandchildren have opportunities in employment. Next slide. And then our partnerships. We want to make sure that all of our neighboring organizations, institutions, and logging companies understand our vision for forestry and I don't want to say buy into it, but at least walk hand in hand with that, because I don't like the term buy in because it's a financial tournament. It's not about buying in. It's just about understanding each other's hopes and dreams and making sure we're supportive of one another. And like I said, walking hand in hand, acknowledging that partnerships and working with our partners is very important to us. But first and foremost, it's always about community. If we're not passing this knowledge on, then it's no good to anybody. Knowledge is something that, we carry forward from past generations, but it's not something that we own as individuals. It's a responsibility to make sure that those who come after us are privy to the knowledge. We have a wonderful, beautiful community school, Census Houston, the place where you go to become good at whatever it is that you want. And as you can see, we have products from our forests integrated within that building to bring the land back into our learning spaces. Family, this is what it's all about. Making sure those children and those family members love the land like our ancestors love the land and have that responsibility, that sense of stewardship, but a sense of entitlement to the land to say, this is mine and I'm going to make sure that it's here for not just myself and the resources here, but for the animals and making sure we have healthy drinking water. And of course, next slide, stewardship, making sure the animals are protected. And we'll go to the next slide here, just knowing that we're running out of time. In the Okanagan, we're threatened with wildfires on a regular basis. So stewardship isn't and management of forests isn't just about product and profit. It's about making sure that the forests are regenerating in and of themselves. So as we are faced with threats of wildfire, reintegrating practices of prescribed burning, but just fire mitigation practices, fuel mitigation practices. We had a very near devastating fire here in our community in West Bank, in Glen Rosa, not in our reserve lands, but our general community in the city of West Bank. And they're very grateful for the work literally Mick did up in that area and fuel mitigation, and guaranteed it averted many travesties, many tragedies with loss of homes. So in closing, we just want to make sure that we are acknowledging our responsibilities to the land. Community forest, the community forest model is our best foot forward in making sure that we are the true stewards of the lands. We're the decision makers, and we carry out our practices in a way that's reciprocal to the forest to make sure, again, that there's resources, there's health, and there's livelihood in all aspects of life as we go down the line. But again, I just want to thank everyone for following the community forest model, for supporting the stewardship model. And thank you, Minister Conroy, for your support. And again, just humbly accept this award on behalf of West Bank First Nation and TTE Resources. Just so gracious.
Thank you, Jordan. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing more of the story of the West Bank First Nation Community Forest and Nititi. I'm working on that correct pronunciation. And but now that I have the description of it mimicking the salmon swimming, I think I've got a better idea. The West Bank Community Forest has been and just continues to be such an inspiration to us all. And so we look forward to continuing to learn about what you're doing. We know that you're leaders in many ways, certainly with respect to landscape level planning and long-term planning and stewardship. So we'll keep watching and learning from you. Thank you so much. So now I'd like to invite Minister Conroy back, and we have just about 20 minutes for some questions. I have some questions that were prepared ahead of time from the BCCFA Board of Directors. So I thought we'd start with those and then see if we have time for additional questions from the delegates here this morning. So the first question is really kind of general, which is to ask you, Minister, what's your vision of the community forest program when you think 10 years from now?
Oh, great question, Jennifer. And you know, I think what I just want to again congratulate everybody that was recognized, and I think your comments, everybody made comments about what they're doing with their community forests is just a great example of why they're so important. So in 10 years from now, I want to make sure we have community forests continuing to thrive in this province, and potentially more community forests and existing community forests. I know many of you have reached out and said you'd like to expand your community forests. So definitely want to see community forests as something that is going to continue for generations to come. And as many of you have said, I think that I know that community forests are not only committed to the stewardship of your community forest, but you're also committed to your communities and the work you do, and you are there for generations to come. You are there to make sure you have sustainable, reliant community or forests, and I want to make sure that what you're doing is there for years to come, and that we have policies in place that support that.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So I guess the next question that I have is sort of a follow-up to that. We've all been learning about the Modernizing Forest Policy Initiative and the intentions paper. And I think our members and all community forests are especially interested in and maybe concerned about the idea of revising the pricing policy for community forests. So, what we see is that the community forest program really owes its success to policies that are in place, notably the tabular rate stumpage, that has really enabled their success. These sorts of policies are the things that have allowed the community forest program to achieve the 8 goals that the province has for community forests, and also to really attain their local community objectives, values, and priorities while also managing viable businesses. So with the new policy intention to harmonize the rate structures between community forests, First Nations woodlands licenses, and woodlots, what's your commitment to ensuring the continued success of community forests?
Well, while we're looking at those rates, we're also working with your organization, having discussions with community forest owners, as well as woodlots and Indigenous nations, to make sure that what we're doing is going to be beneficial to everyone, and we want to make sure that community forests continue. So we are looking at that work. I mean, we've just we tabled our amendments to FERPA on Wednesday, and we, I want to make sure that we're looking at a new way of looking at landscape plans for the forest. We're looking at the entire forest, working with in collaboration with Indigenous nations, and then but the framework that we announced, it will not actually apply to community forest agreements or First Nation woodlot licenses covering areas under a certain size. And we haven't determined the size because we want to work with the association to make sure that we have input from you and ensure that what is decided makes sense, because we want to make sure that that we're supporting community forests for years to come. So that's, one of the things I know we got asked when we talked about how we're going to develop a new framework for managing our forests, and we want to make sure that I think when I talk to people at work that are involved with community forests across the province, and I had the real pleasure. I was just with Susan. That was just last week, Susan. My gosh! So I was just with Susan last week. We went to the Harriet Proctor Community Forest just outside of Nelson, and saw the incredible work they're doing in collaboration with the FES. That around how to utilize all the fiber in the forest, and it was a great example. But it was just really good to see the passion from people that are so committed to their community forests. And so we want to make sure we're supporting that, and moving forward we will continue to do that.
Thank you, Minister. We're certainly very engaged in discussions with your staff and the ministry on the FERPA Improvement Initiative, and as you sort of identified. Community forests are unique and kind of a special form of tenure, and we don't always fit with policy that's more designed for the larger industry. And so it's really important work that we have ahead of us to figure out, how community forests will fit in that new planning framework. So thanks for your comments on that. Okay, another question from the board is with respect to First Nations engagement. So as you know, about half of the community forests in the province are held by a First Nation or a partnership with one or more First Nation. But for community forest groups that are working, that maybe aren't in that situation and that are working to develop stronger partnerships, what's your advice for them when the land base is on the tradition of the community forest, is on the traditional territory of multiple Indigenous nations? We, in some cases, as many as 23 is the experience of some of the southern community forests. Do you have any insights or advice of how to approach that engagement?
So that is something that we're also looking at, and with a number of things that we're developing, a number of our initiatives, because it is really critically important to make sure that we are talking to the rights and title holders and those people that, that there are overlapping claims in areas across the province, as you say, and I'm sure everybody is well aware of that. And when I first became minister, they showed me a big map with all of the 204 nations identified across the province, but the overlapping claims, especially in the southern part of the province and over the southwest part of the province, is you're right. There's in some cases, when we did the spotted owl deferral in the southern part of the province, we had 43 nations that we had to talk to around the Spuzzum area. So it was, so those are issues that we're working on, and we are, our staff are continually reaching out to nations and asking them, how to best move forward on this. We are also asking nations how to best move forward. I think you have some, in the fact that the community forests are smaller, you have more defined boards, you're able to reach out to those nations in that sense, which is good. And many of you are doing that already, or many of the community forests are already are ran by Indigenous nations, as West Bank is a perfect example. So it's definitely something we're working on. It's part of DRIPA, our Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I shouldn't use acronyms. We're terrible here in government. There's acronyms everywhere, and I got 5 pages of acronyms when I first got this job. But we're very committed to implementing the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and making sure that we are having these all important discussions. And I encourage people to continue to do that. I know many are already doing it, and it's you could probably give us some advice on how you're doing it as well. So we're always open to advice.
Oh, thank you. And we, yesterday we had a session on reconciliation, and John Jack from the Huayet First Nation gave a great presentation, and he talked about some of the really practical things that people can be working on, and it's really about doing the personal work and investing time and energy to build those relationships. So I think it's incredibly important work for all of us. Thank you. Next question from the board relates to wildfire management and what you see as the role for community forests in wildfire management. And one of the reasons that I bring this up is that recently the BCCFA submitted some comments to the engagement on the climate preparedness and adaptation strategy. And when we read it, there were a lot of good things in there, but we really saw that there was a lack of attention to wildfire risk reduction and to taking action on fuel mitigation and risk reduction activities. There was a mention about prescribed and cultural fire, but we really felt that there needs to be more action taken in that regard. And as you know, community forests are really devoting themselves to this work. So my question is, what do you see when you think about community forests as their role in our efforts to mitigate climate change, adapt to climate change, and reduce the risk of wildfire?
Definitely, and I traveled quite a bit this summer around the province and toured, saw communities that were devastated, but I also saw, the community of Logan Lake, where the work that they have done with their community forest over the years. The Premier and I went on a helicopter tour over Logan Lake and the region there, and you could see the stark difference of where the fire came right up to the community and how it turned away, and the work that the community forest folks have done to build those fire breaks, to make sure that there's the integration between the community and the forest is just so important, and we're looking at ways that we can reach out to community forests, to communities across the province, Indigenous nations, on how we can do that mitigation. We are definitely moving forward as a ministry on better ways that we can do the work year round. We've talked to firefighters who say they would, some of them work part-time of the year. They only work during the fire season, but they are well equipped to know where's the best places to build those fire guards, to build, to do that mitigation, and as our community forest. So I saw that was one of the things we talked about it here at Proctor, where they've built some breaks. They've done some harvesting to ensure that they have breaks to protect the community, because they're right in the forest there. And so that's critically important. And we're looking at ways we can do that. We're actually hoping to get some more funding to be able to do that right across the province, and work with communities and work with community forests, because it's really critically important. So it's a key for us. The urban interface areas are just so important to make sure that we can protect communities. And if it means those harvesting, making sure you have those breaks in place, and the appropriate trees are being replanted, that don't quite catch fire as much as others, just making sure that it's in place. But it was really, and the one actually example that really stood out for me and the Premier, we toured the Okanagan Indian Band on the west side of Okanagan Lake and saw the devastation, but the chief took us and showed us his 80-year-old aunt's place. And she practices cultural burning every year on her piece of property there. And on either side of her property, it was black. They were burnt. The property was, everything was gone. It was just black and burnt. And hers was green. Hers was a little oasis in the middle of it all. And it's her years of work that she's been doing with the baby now. And he says she doesn't do it all by herself anymore, but she's still pretty spry. And it just made us realize how critically important this is. And that's one of the things that's in the amendments to the FERPA Act is more opportunity for prescribed burning and also cultural burning and working with Indigenous nation and communities, because it's critical. I mean, climate change is here and it's not going anywhere, and we have to have ways to mitigate it, and looking at how we can do that in the off seasons. I mean, some communities it's a little more tougher to do it on. I mean, I'm from the Kootenays, and there's a lot of snow there in the winter. It's not quite as easy, but in the parts of the Okanagan, Kamloops area where some of the really terrible fires this year, there is work that can be done throughout the year. And so we are looking at trying to implement that sooner than later.
No, that's good to hear. Thank you. We have a number of community forests this year that are doing wildfire risk reduction projects through the COVID economic recovery funding. We've partnered with BC Wildfire Service, and that's fantastic. And I think we're really eager partners, and we're looking for long-term sustainable funding to help community forests and others continue that incredibly important work. And working with BC Wildfire Service and UBC to learn as much as we can about the efficacy and how to do this work as efficiently as possible. So thank you for that. I'm just going to pose one more question to you, and then see if there's anyone from the conference that would like to jump in if we have time. This is about old growth. So we had a presentation yesterday about what's the latest on the implementation of the old growth strategic recommendations. And this question from our board of directors was just, what are your thoughts on how to de-escalate the present old growth conflict in BC? I think people in communities, and you can imagine community forest managers and board members are struggling with the heightened conflict. And so what do you think we can do to de-escalate that?
Yeah, great question. Something I deal with regularly here, and it's it is a real issue. And what we have to keep reminding people that is that we are concerned about the old growth and the those area risks, because that they're irreplaceable, and we want to make sure that they're here for generations to come. So we part of the amendments to the Forest and Range Practices Act will help us with that moving forward. But it's also looking at the making sure that we did make sure that when we did task the two foresters to do the strategic plan old growth, that we committed to implementing all 14 recommendations, as I'm sure you've heard, and we're doing that. But it's also having that government-to-government conversations with the Indigenous nations on whose traditional territory the old growth actually lies, and respect their wants, wishes, and needs. Respect the fact that some nations might want to harvest, some nations might want to conserve, some nations might want to do a combination of both, and working with them. And we're hoping that people that are passionate about the old growth issue and in showing their passion in different ways. I mean, I must admit I've been known to protest a few times in my youth, but I always made sure I was never breaking the law. But, so I respect the right to peaceful protest, but at the same time, I'm hoping that people will respect the rights and wants and wishes of Indigenous nations. I mean, the Pachidat has reached out a number of times and said, please leave us in peace so that we can carry on doing our forest landscape plan. Not only do they harvest, they have a sawmill, they work in the forest, but they also conserve. And I think as British Columbians, we need to respect that. And we need to remind people that the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, it's not just an act in words. It is something that we need to put in practice, and we all need to put it into practice. And if an Indigenous nation doesn't choose to do something us as an individual wants them to do, we have to respect that that's their right when we're talking about the Declaration. So it's not easy. I think it was Grand Chief Stuart Phillips said that reconciliation isn't for wimps, and he's right. I mean, it's something that we need to move forward on, and so many of you are already doing that with your community forests, and I'm hoping that as we continue to move forward, that the temperature will be alleviated considerably, but we have to get this right. We have to make sure that we are conserving forests. And, I like to say, I have 9 grandkids, as you said, and I think some more are going to be coming. So, and I want to make sure that those kids, if they want to work in the forest industry like their granny did, that they have the opportunity to do that. I was actually my oldest granddaughter is 21. She actually worked in the pulp mill that I was the first woman to work in this summer, and as a summer student. So she was the 4th generation of our family to work in the forest industry. And I want to make sure that our kids have that opportunity to work in a sustainable, resilient forest industry. But I also want to make sure if they want the opportunity to work, to walk in an old growth forest, those incredibly iconic trees, that they have the opportunity to do that. And we can do both. But we have to work together, and there has to be respect on all sides on people's wishes and passions, but we need to work together. And we are hoping that what we're doing with our work on the strategic plan is going to help with that, future deferrals, and making sure that we have supports in place, because some deferrals could result in job losses. So we have to have those supports in place. I'm not going to be announcing deferrals without having supports if it means that someone might be losing a job. We want to make sure we have supports. We want to make sure we have supports for local communities who are primarily dependent on the forest community, because it's, I like to remind, as I've said a couple times this morning already, that the forest industry is across the entire province. This is not a rural issue. The forest industry, there's many people in the Lower Mainland that are hired and live and are sustained by the forest industry. So in moving forward, I want to make sure that we have a sustainable, resilient forest industry for years to come. And that we will all see that these are things that we're doing that'll move us forward, and that we can work together, whether you're an environmentalist, a person that works in the forest, Indigenous. I mean, your quotes there, like your motto there, local people, local forests, local decisions, are exactly the direction we need to move in and that's what our intention is all about, province we're moving in. And so for me, it's this is a passion as much as anybody's, and I want to make sure that we're doing it right.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. I know in a minute, there's one question that's come through the chat from Gord Shipman of the Eskedum First Nation. And it may be a bit of a food for thought or comment for you to consider, which is that, he says it's so good that First Nations are going to have more say, but they'll need time and capacity funding to be able to staff up their land and resource departments. Mm-hmm. And there's a concern that without capacity for planning, that there'll be a gridlock of plan approvals. And so the question was, is this something, how will government address this? And we see it as very important.
We see it as very important too. I hear it all the time. I've had considerable discussions with Murray Rankin, the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. We're putting together proposals to Treasury Board. I mean, this is something that is a real concern to me. We have 204 nations, and even if only half of them want to talk to us and are interested in talking about forests in their area, we need to ensure that we have capacity in place. So it is definitely a concern and is definitely something that we're looking at. And I hear that, and we need to ensure that voices are heard at the table. So it's something that we're all very concerned about and working towards.
Okay, thank you so much. And on behalf of the whole BC Community Forest Association and all of our partners and colleagues, thank you so much for joining us here today. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Appreciate being here. Really, looking forward to getting out and seeing more of your forest.
Indeed, we'll make that happen.
Okay, take care, everyone.